Hey guys, welcome to this session by K21 Academy. In this session, we are going to look at how to create a virtual machine, and within that virtual machine, we are going to create Linux machine on a Google Cloud using console. Now let us take a quick glance at the agenda. Firstly, we will be seeing what is a virtual machine, and then we will see how to create a virtual machine instance, where you will be seeing how to enable API, and you will be creating a Linux virtual machine instance. And then you will be connecting to virtual machine instance through SSH. And finally, at the end, we will be seeing how to delete the VM instance. So here we will see how to stop the Linux VM instance, and then we will see how to delete the VM instance. So we have taken a clip from one of our certification training program on Google Certified Associate Cloud Engineer certification. And in this clip, our expert will be creating a Linux machine on Google Cloud using console.
Hey there, this is Atul from team K21 Academy, and in this lesson we are going to look at how to create a virtual machine which comes under compute type of resources, and within that virtual machine we are going to create a Linux machine on a Google Cloud using console. So in this particular lesson we'll use console. Here we'll be covering from console, which is a graphical user interface, and then we'll be doing the same thing on few other things using a command line interface. We will tell you the introduction, what is compute, and I'll explain you in a minute what the compute is. And then we'll talk in the lesson 2 will be, or chapter 2 will be about documentation link. And these link will be handy if you want to go a little bit more deep into these topics. You can go and refer these documentation. We have used these documentation in order to create these guides, and these will be related to this lab that you're performing. Then the chapter number 3 is going to be prerequisite. I'll explain you prerequisite as well. And then subsequent lessons will be about the task, which is like how to create a virtual machine. And then how do you connect to that virtual machine in lesson number 5. Then lesson number 6, we always recommend after every task to stop and delete them. And wherever we are not deleting, we'll tell you reason as well. The reason why we ask everyone to stop and delete is because you only have $300 over the next 3 months. So we want to make sure that you perform all the labs within those 3 months within that $300. You won't take all 3 months. You should might be very quick. If you follow all our videos and guides, you should be able to perform much quicker. But if you keep machine running or leave it running, it will be taking money from the $300 credit you use. So it's always recommended to delete them. That's why you see chapter number 6 about deleting the guide. And then finally, we'll have, if depending on if we hit any problems, will be added into the troubleshooting section. So let's begin with first, what is virtual machine? So virtual machine is a machine that consists of a operating system, and that has some CPU cycle and CPUs, and then memory on which you deploy your application. Now there are other computes as well, which we'll see in subsequent lessons or modules later. So there are other different type of compute as well. A virtual machine is one of them. Another one is containers, Kubernetes, App Engine, and so on. So we'll talk about, in this particular lab, we're only going to talk about virtual machines. Now you can install either a virtual machine of type Linux, and different flavors of Linux or different operating system type, or we'll have Windows Server as well. Now, Windows Server, you don't get it in free account. And so that's why we might later, once after 3 months you upgrade, in future, we might add some Windows machine from our paid account, or that you can upgrade. Now, one question we keep getting again is after 90 days, will I be automatically be charged? Answer is no. You'll be asked to upgrade that account, and only when you upgrade to pay-as-you-go model after your 90 days, then only you'll be charged. So don't upgrade to pay-as-you-go before that. Use your 90 days, and then you can give an option. So we are going to create a Linux machine, and you can pick any of these operating system or flavors of that operating system. We'll see that when we create the machine on this. Now there is a concept of a region, which is geographical location, and zone I'll explain you when we come to this place. So as I said, Windows can't be created on a free account, so we'll be creating a Linux account. Now, one more thing, if you're a beginner in Linux, if you don't know about Linux, we can give you a bonus class, which we will talk about the basic common commands of Linux. Things like VI, how do you open a file, how do you change a file or edit a file, what are the common commands like CP, which is copy file, delete file, and so on. So if you need that or if you need help, you ask in our WhatsApp group and we'll be happy to add that in future as a bonus. So this is for Linux. So this is what we're going to cover in this. We are going to create a Linux type of virtual machine. We'll connect it using SSH, which is a secure shell. We'll tell you how to do that. In order to connect to the Linux machine, we'll be using secure shell. And then we'll delete or stop and pause. We'll see those as well. So this is all we are going to cover. So let's begin first. Documentation. Again, there are machine types, different type of machines. We'll cover that when we look into these specific machine types. But it's always good to have the documentation open and come handy. I've open machine types here. There are different type of machines which we'll see. So when we come to that screen, I'll show it to you. Then there is also about creating a machine, Linux machine. You can go onto this documentation and refer to this documentation as well. But for now, watch the video and then a couple of times or maybe one time, and then this documentation will help, plus this video will help as well. So with that, first prerequisite is that you should have a free account. We covered how to create a Google free account, or you can do from a paid account as well, but as long as you have a Google account, GCP, Google Cloud account, not just Google account, but Google Cloud account. And that cloud account we already created in previous module. Then you should also have a project, and if you don't have a project, I'll show it to you here as well. So this is the diagram which we saw. Let me make it a slightly bigger, and we'll be covering this in module 1 if you have not gone through the theory yet. So the top level, there's an organization. You can have, that's optional. You can create a company. Company might have some departments, and department might have some folders. And then folders, these are all optional, which is blue and red. Now the mandatory thing is project. Project might be your dev project and test project and a UAT project, or you might do it from a department point of view. You can organize them, and that is the mandatory item, which is a project. You should have a project. We'll see that. We covered that in module 1. And then project will have resources. So in this case, virtual machine is a resource. We are going to create that resource inside a project. So these are the two things you should have. And if you don't have a project, don't worry, I'm going to show it to you again here. So first thing is we connect, and let me make it smaller again. We will go and connect to console.cloud.google.com. We covered that earlier, and make sure you select a project. So let me go and directly to my account. So this is my cloud account. Now remember to ensure that one more thing, you might have multiple accounts, so make sure you use the correct account, which is this one. I've used this one in past. So make sure you're on the right Google account or GCP account. You might have multiple Gmail you can log in, or Google you can log in at the same time. So now if you see here, I don't have any project. I deleted the project in previous module that I created. Or if you want to see the resource, you can see all those resources will be under here, under resources, and we'll go into identity. And IAM stands for Identity and Access Management. So we'll talk about identity and access management and in the respective module in future. So stay tuned for that. So under resources, if you see there's no resources, I deleted the project which I had. I'll go back to my previous console, and I need to create the project, which I'll probably show to you again here. So I go back onto console.cloud.com. You probably might already have a project, and if you have the project, go and select it from there. It keep moving me back to my personal ID, so I keep changing it back. So once you have selected the project, if you don't have, I'll tell you how to create a project, but then we'll go to the hamburger menu and then select from here, you select a compute engine. Once you select a compute engine, first thing you need to enable is APIs, and API stands for Application Programming Interface API. So what that API basically will do is that gives access. So what you're saying is give access to this compute API to my GCP console. So console is another acting as a client that needs access to this compute API so that it can create it. Now this is only one-time task per project. So every time you create a new project or different projects, you have to grant access to this API on that project. So currently I don't have a project, or I don't have any project. You can create it here, but so this is what I'm going to create on project here. Then I'll give and enable the API, and then I'm going to go onto this instance, or I'll select compute, and then I'll create an instance, and I'll provide all the details of that instance when I go to the instance. So I'm going to go and create it, directly go to the console and let me show it to you then there. So first of all, I'll create a new project here. If you already have a project, you can use that project. So I'm going to create a new project here and say my project might be, so now project also have some limits. I've deleted, and so in free account you have the quota for all those things which are, you have limitations, and you make sure you delete these, and these deletions might be, you might need to clean it up back. So we'll not, I'll use one project now, K21 Academy PR project, or just to show that it's a project, K21 Academy project 01, and we'll keep that project, that. Now you can create organizations, but I've not created any organization. That's not mandatory. So we'll simply say project create. Now this project will have a project ID as well, and we'll see that when we cover, if we need to go to more detail. So this probably might be creating here, and you see under this create project, it's going and it'll go and create it. And once you create this project created, you'll come and see it here. So within that, it's right now creating this project, and I'll come here, and probably I might have to refresh this. So this is my project, and my project ID is same, K21 Academy project 01. So you can have this project ID and project name can be two different things. And in console, wherever I need to refer a project, I'll be referring using project ID when I'm doing any command line, which we'll see later. So once you have the project ready, you go to this hamburger menu, and compute is where you have all my compute type. We have app engine, which we'll see later. Compute engine is the one which probably is where my virtual machines are. Kubernetes we'll see later. In functions, Cloud Run, all of these Cloud Run functions and Kubernetes engine. We'll have a separate module for Kubernetes engine. We'll have app engine, cloud function, and Cloud Run in one module later. So this is what right now we are interested in virtual machine. So we'll come to compute engine and click on virtual machine here. Now there are other things as well. We'll focus those later. I don't want to overdo right now. We don't want to overburden with a lot of things. For now, let's begin with basics or concepts, or very basic thing, which is virtual machine. So this is where you'll go and select virtual machine. Now, before you go to the virtual machine, you need to select a project. You can select a project from here, or here, I'm already here. This is my project I'm selecting, and say continue. Now, as I said to you earlier, you need to enable API. So you need to grant access to your compute engine API. So your console can go, you can do operations, or you're allowed to manage your compute engine API, application programming interface. So click on enable. Now this is first you have to do one time for all the projects, or every project you create new, you have to enable that API. Now tomorrow in this project, if I add storage, or if I do some networking, then I need to enable the networking API as well. Now what's happening is, as you say compute engine enable API, if you see, this is my notification engine. What it's saying is enable service compute.googleapis.com, and I'm enabling the service compute so that I can go and create my virtual machines on this. Now this is where I have operations that I can do, but because I don't have any machine right now, first thing I need to do is create a machine, or we call instance as well, and VM stands for virtual machine. So I'll click on create instance. Now this is where you will be entering name of the instance. So, and that will also be given your host name of the machine. So K21 again instance 1. We'll keep it K, and then label is basically you can put or signify. You can always take a help from here. So labels help you to organize your objects or resources within a project. You might say this environment is a dev environment or a test environment, or for whatever additional metadata you want to put into this virtual machine. We leave it blank. Now so there is a concept of a region in Google, and region is a geographical location in which you have a data center. So you have all these regions, US, different regions in America, Europe, Asia Pacific. And now again, because it's a trial account, I only say 3, but you might have more zones or more region as well. So we'll leave it to the default US Central 1. And then within a region, you have zones, and zones is like think of it Within zone, you have the data centers, and in data center, you actually have your virtual machine being set up. So I'm in a data center US Central 1 within that zone dash A. So we'll leave it to the default. So this is where physically my machine is going to get created in that data center. Now there are different type of machines. So there's a machine family. You have a general purpose, like if you have a specific requirement, where like if you need a machine which needs compute hungry or CPU hungry, you can use compute optimize. And this is where you see different type of machine types. I'll explain you machine type as well a little bit in a minute. So you have C2 standard, which is a CPU intensive, 2 standard 4. So 2 is a generation basically, and 4 means here 4 number of CPUs. 8 here is 8 CPUs and so on. And now this is for my memory related. So that's why I see M1. And 96 means it's 96 CPUs. And 40 means there's a 40 CPUs here. So the last one number represents number of CPUs, and M means memory. E means general purpose. GPU, which is a graphical or more that needs a lot more graphics related work, especially in you have data mining or you have cryptocurrency or high GPU, NVIDIA type of graphics card on that. Again, same thing. Here you have naming here is slightly different here, 1G or 2G or 4G. It doesn't have actual CPUs here with that. So in this case, it's a multiple of 12. So 1G represents 12 CPU, 2GB is 24 CPU, and so on. So these are graphics enabled. So in this, we are going to leave it the default general purpose CPUs. Now again, this, if you see here, type is normal E2. Standard 2 means 2 vCPUs. You might get the emphasis what I'm giving is you might have these in exam question. You don't remember, but it's easy to understand that 2 means it's 2 CPU, 4 means 4 CPU at the end. Okay, so now if you do know more about machine types, this is the documentation we have given. So you have different machine types, and these are E2, which is general purpose. These are machine type, and then you have, these are all E2 machines. Then you have high CPU, high performance. Within N is your standard machine type. N represents standard machine type, and so on. So coming back, now once you have done that, now there is a confidential VM service, which means you can enable the confidential computing service on this VM instance, which is you're protecting that or encrypting both memory or encrypting with the keys, encryption keys that Google doesn't have access. You have the access to those. So we'll leave it default for now. We are not making memory. We are not keeping memory of this VM encrypted. Now you can also configure a container, which is a we'll see this container later in a dedicated module when we talk about Docker and Kubernetes. But on a virtual machine, you can also install and configure Docker container or container runtime so that you can start container. Now, when you select this container, you get one container per virtual machine. So that is a limitation if you're selecting from here. There's a separate way which is using Kubernetes. You can run multiple containers. Again, what is container? What is Kubernetes? How do you deploy them? We will be selecting or we'll be learning in a dedicated module on Kubernetes. Now, so leave it to default container. Now, this is where you install boot disk. Boot disk, also called as a boot volume, is through which your operating system will start. And that will have the operating system installation as well. So by default, it's saying Debian Linux. We'll look into the document what we are doing. So we are changing 8 Linux from Debian to Ubuntu 20 version. So you can leave it Debian or whatever operating system you need to install, you select here. So you'll click and say change. So this will give me the list of all the different operating systems that are available. So this is where I have Debian, you have Fedora, CentOS. These are all Ubuntu. These are all Linux flavors. And then I also have Windows Server. Now, as of today, the Windows machines are not free or you're not allowed under the free tier to create Windows Server. So we are going to select Ubuntu, and within Ubuntu, you will have what version of Ubuntu. So we're selecting the latest one, Ubuntu 20.10. We'll be selecting this here. Now, you can also change the size of that disk on which you get operating system. So, but we'll leave it default 10 gig of size. You can create the custom images. You can make your custom image. So from this operating system, you can create your image, and from those images, you can start operating system, or you can install the virtual machines or create virtual machine. So tomorrow, let's suppose I have this installed Ubuntu. On that Ubuntu, I install my own softwares and create them a image. I store them in that image basically, and then store that image. And then from that image, later I create a virtual machine. I'll have those software already installed. So I'll have the custom image for that reason. Of snapshots, what is a snapshot? We'll cover that when we come storage. We'll go more in snapshots. And then if you have an existing disk, so we'll leave it to the default public image and select this. So now I scroll down, and now this is a good interesting thing to understand. Now there are some applications that might run in virtual machine, and that application might need a access to your storage, for example, or they need some access to update some networking or a database. So if you want to give access to this machine to access those services, you can do it through the APIs through this. So what I'm saying is that this machine can reach out to my other services. So this is the default access, or you can access to all the cloud APIs. So it can do storage, it can do databases. This is for other external Google Cloud services. So for now, we'll leave it to the default. Now, this machine will have the firewall, which means only the port number 22, because it's a Linux machine. SSH, that's being allowed, but you might install a web server on top of that machine. So that web server will not be installed, or sorry, that web server will be installed, but you won't be able to access it because the firewall is blocking that port number. And this is where we'll say allow HTTP or allow HTTPS. So for now, I'm just saying in future, I might install HTTP server on this machine. So I'm allowing HTTP traffic, which means port number 80. Now here, you see you have additional settings, like you can do management related, which means I'll cover that later. You might put some additional details on for description on this. You might enable security. Security in is there's a virtual machines which are shielded, which means again, read out these documentation or help will be handy for you to understand these. And again, we'll cover these later in some of the advanced modules, but for now, they're self-explanatory in terms of the additional security settings on these virtual machines. Now, this is where you select disk. What you're saying is that disk is attached to a virtual machine on which you have operating system installed. Now, when you delete the virtual machine, what should happen to the disk? Do you want to keep it so that you can in future use this disk same data? Or you also want to delete the disk when you delete the virtual machine? So that's a deletion rule on boot disk. You can also encrypt the data. By default, data will always be encrypted on the disk, and the data encryption might be using Google keys or customer keys, your own keys as well. We'll leave it to the default name. And then networking, where exactly this machine is going to sit. So it's creating a default network. This is the host name as well. This is where you can come and change a host name if you want. But there is a additional settings you need to do here. So this is the machine host name will be changed. You can change. This machine will get an IP. So that IP will be getting that IP from these network. We'll talk about network in the another module. There's a dedicated module about networking. For now, I'm creating this machine inside a default network, and with it, it'll get an IP address from that network. And then sole tenancy is basically that this machine is dedicated, the physical machine on which this virtual machine is running. You are the sole tenant of that full machine, and you can run. This is when if you don't want any other machines to be running on that physical device. So I'll leave it all to the default. Will not change anything. Here we go further down. And let me go back. We'll leave it to the default as I said. And then this is where you will go and select the SSH keys. Now SSH stands for secure shell. And if you are connecting from a local machine, let's suppose you on from laptop, you want to connect to this machine, you have multiple ways to connect a machine. You can use username, password, but which is not secure. You probably want to do the secure shell, you want to use the keys which have public key and private key. Public key will be attached or kept on the server, and private key you say keep safely. And then when you connect using private key. Now, you can add these SSH keys later as well. I'm not adding any SSH keys. You can add multiple SSH keys as well. So we're not doing any keys right now adding here. We probably will be connecting from directly from the console itself because we want to focus on learning virtual machine. But if you need any additional steps, as I said, you can reach out to the team and we will be able to help you on how to create the public private keys and then attach and then access from PuTTY or any SSH client tool on your local machine. But later in the second part of this video, I'm going to show you how to connect directly from the console itself. So this is where you see connect, and then you simply say create. And this will, when you say create, this will go and create the virtual machine. And if you see here, now I have a setting which because I was playing with this environment, so I was not able to create this because there is a setting on E2 instance, do not serve it on host maintenance is equal to terminate, because I picked up one of the parameters there. So I'll quickly go and close this and create one more time, but with leaving the default values. And then we'll go and select here. So we'll say that K21-VM-instance, and we'll leave it to the default region and zone. We'll leave it to the default machine configuration. We'll leave it to all these default. This is where we want to change boot disk from here. And here I want to do the Ubuntu and Ubuntu again 20. Again, you can leave it otherwise default operating system as well. Now, we will allow HTTP traffic. And this is where I was doing boot disk when I said one of the options I selected here that caused that problem. You will have the link on the documentation on why that problem happened. So I've already documented this problem in our troubleshooting section, which you see here. Troubleshooting EC2 instance do not support this terminate. So click on create. And then again, if you go here, and now it's creating the instance, and within few minutes, you will see, give it probably 4-5 minutes, and you will see the machine being created here. Now we are going to connect to the virtual machine through the SSH, and I'll show you here how do you connect. But before that, let's go and look at in the console, how does it look like. So this is where I was on Google console. Back onto this is what we created a machine. It says green tick, which means instance is running. I can, if you want, you can refresh the screen. If you don't see, within few minutes, probably 4 to 5 minutes, you should be having this machine up and running. This shows that this machine name is K21-VM-instance-1. It's in the zone or data center US-Central1-A. And each machine will have a internal IP and possibly external IP. So internal IPs are the IPs that are used to connect or talk machines internally within the Google Cloud. So if you have two machines, they want to talk to each other in Google Cloud, they'll be talking using this internal IP. Now, if you want these machines to be accessible from external world, then you'll be using external IP, which is this IP. Now you can connect using different tools or different ways. SSH, because it's a Linux machine, you'll be connecting using SSH, which stands for Secure Shell. And within that, you can open in the browser window. So you can open SSH in the browser window. That's what we're going to look at here. You can also open in the browser window on a custom port. If you, by default, it's listening on port number 22. So we'll be using on the browser. If you have a custom port, you can use that. We are not going to cover that right now. Now, you can also open the browser window using a private SSH key. So if you have generated your own private SSH key when we were creating a virtual machine, that's what you can pick as well. Now, you can also use gcloud command, which is a cloud shell, which we'll see in the next lesson how to connect or next topic. Then, so we are not going to cover in this lesson, but we have a separate lesson coming on creating this machine through command line interface or this cloud shell, and that is what we are going to see later. Then you can also use SSH client like PuTTY or other third-party tools like MobaXterm. These are the tools that you use to connect. And for those connections, you should have the private key with you, which we have not created yet. So in future, if you guys are interested, we might create that steps on how to create a SSH key and generate using tool called Putigen. And then how do you attach it to this virtual machine and then use terminal SSH client like tools. So these are the different method you can connect. So if you go, I'm clicking on SSH and I'll connect to this machine. And once I'm connected, I can log in as root user. I can use as different account as well. And once this is done, I can look at and clean it up as well. Now, but before you clean up, make sure you take a screenshot right now and then share it in our WhatsApp group so that I know two things. One, you have successfully completed this lab, and it'll also inspire others to do this lab. So share it in our WhatsApp group. Now to connect, I simply click on this SSH button and it'll open this new window in the browser itself, which will be opening the SSH terminal on the browser itself. So that's what will be happening, and we'll be able to log into this machine. So it's connecting over SSH, but over the browser. Now I've logged into this user. I can type host name. So my host name is K21-VM-instance1. I can log into the root user and I can say sudo su minus. And now I'm on this root user as well. I can exit from this machine and I can exit from this machine as well. So now I'm on the screen back onto where I have this machine running. I can import a VM, but we have not covered. We'll see it later. Refresh is to refresh the screen here. I can select this machine and then say stop this machine because it's already running. If it stop, I can start it. I can suspend. So suspend is a life cycle. We'll cover in the theory part, we'll have a separate topic about suspending, but suspending is similar to your shutting down, not shutting down. You have a laptop and laptop's lid is being shut down or kept down. So it will store the memory state. And when you start it again, it will come back to the same place where your memory is still intact within your virtual machine in a storage point. But we'll cover that in detail in theory. Reset is similar to reboot, and then finally delete to delete, so that it's always good practice to delete once you're done with the lab here in the trial version, so that you are not charged for running a machine. Now, when you shut down the machine, there is some slight charge, which is a boot volume. So when you're creating a machine, there are two types of charges. One charge is to basically CPU and memory, and that is the biggest charge. When you shut that machine down, you're not being charged for CPU and memory, but you're still being charged for the attached disk you have for this machine. So if I go and click on this machine, I'll go and look at the details, and in that I'm using a network interface card, so I'm paying for this public IP. Apart from that, I have this disk which is of 10 gig. When I shut down the machine, even machine is down, I'm still paying for this 10 GB of disk storage and then a network interface card. So, but as I said, the charges are very minimal. You can leave them down. But the maximum is about CPU and memory, which I'm paying for this machine. So if you shut down, you don't get charged for CPU and memory, but you still get charged for the network interface and the disk. And for that reason, we probably delete it. But before you delete, make sure you take a screenshot of this, share in WhatsApp group, so we know that you have done it on this lab. So once it's done, you click on delete, and this will go and delete this virtual machine completely from here. You refresh from here, and once you delete this, it will clear up the external IPs. It will also clear up the disk that you have. So currently we should be able to see the delete. The delete will be that boot volume will be removed as well. So now disk is gone. And if you see, my machine should have been gone now as well from here. So I click on virtual machine, the machine would have been gone as well now. So that way we have tested, we have stopped the machine, we have deleted the instance. Now in order to delete, you can directly go and delete it. You don't need to stop it. But when you say delete, it will go and behind the scene stop and then delete this. And if you hit any problems, that will be in troubleshooting section. So just to do a quick recap, in the two lessons, we looked at how to create a Linux virtual machine on Google Cloud using console. We created a first project We enabled API, we created a Linux virtual machine, and then we connected through SSH. And then finally, we deleted or clean up the instance that deleted the underlying storage as well as the network interface card.
We have put down everything about the certification, including the basic concepts that one should be knowing. So you will be introduced with Google Cloud Platform, virtual machines, virtual networks, Cloud IAM, data storage services, Google Kubernetes Engine, other compute services like App Engine, Cloud Formations, Cloud Run, resource management, resource monitoring, load balancing and autoscaling, interconnecting networks, infrastructure automation with Google Cloud Platform APIs, and infrastructure automation with Deployment Manager. So this is a 6-week program which we have divided into 12 sessions. We take you from basics to advanced level along with the tips and resources for clearing the certification exam. Once you are done with the certification, then you can start preparing for your CV and start applying for jobs. We also have a separate team working for CV preparation and on-job support. So if you want to become a Google certified associate cloud engineer and want to learn right from basics to expert level, then we have a comprehensive step-by-step training for you that includes hands-on labs, including exam preparation, and the most important part, 1 year on-job support. If you are interested in this program, then I would highly recommend you to attend our free class, which covers why and who should learn GCP, cloud and service model, Google Cloud Platform architecture, and many other things. If you are interested in this free class, you can visit k21academy.com/gcp02. You can also find the link in the description.